Hi, it's Colin Coward. I started The Volume to bring you some of the most authentic voices in sports. While you're here, make sure you hit subscribe. Thanks.
All right, guys, I just wanted to take a few minutes tonight to give my instant reaction to that incredible Brooklyn Nets game on the road in Philadelphia against the 76ers. A heavyweight fight. Felt kind of like a potential finals preview, but it's more of like a first round preview because that's probably when these two teams will run into each other under the circumstances. It was a blowout, but I thought it was a very interesting blowout. So I just wanted to hit on a couple of quick things that I thought were really interesting about that game. I thought the story of the game and the reason why the Nets were so dominant had to do with controlling pace. And that's not just about the speed you play. It's about getting stops on one end, and then on the other end, being able to score so that you can set your defense and continue to get stops. It's a real nice flow that way that is advantageous to teams that succeed in the half court, which the Brooklyn Nets do a really nice job of. I wanted to start on the defensive end, though, because the Brooklyn Nets, similar to last year, lack defensive personnel. That was my biggest concern with the Brooklyn Nets last year, with all of the hype surrounding James Harden and Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. But when push came to shove, as that season was tailing off and as they went into the postseason, they were defending really well just by switching everything and by competing, being willing to slide your feet and try to keep people in front. They have 4 bad defensive guards. Kyrie Irving's not a great defensive guard. Seth Curry, not a great defensive guard. The same goes for Goran Dragic, and the same goes for Patty Mills. They had at least 2 of those guys on the floor at any given moment tonight, but I have to give them a ton of credit. They competed. They did the best they could, especially Kyrie Irving on James Harden. Just did an amazing job sliding their feet and making things difficult on Tyrese Maxey and making things difficult on James Harden. That's what makes that whole system work. They switch everything so you don't have to ask those guys to chase people over the top of screens or fight through a ton of contact. They just have to focus up, slide their feet, and keep one guy in front of them. And if they can do that, the entire system works, especially when you've got so much length on the back end, with them playing guys like Kevin Durant, with them playing guys like Nick Claxton and Andre Drummond. And that's going to get even more exciting down the line when you basically give all of Nick Claxton minutes to Ben Simmons, and a little bit of what you're getting from James Johnson and a little bit of what you're getting from Bruce Brown goes to Ben Simmons, a guy who's like a perennial defensive player of the year candidate. That just makes it even more exciting. But part of what made this work tonight was the work the guards were doing on the defensive end, which takes us to the other end of the floor. As they continually got stops and as they were able to score, they kept things in the half court, but they're comfortable operating in the half court. That's the tricky thing. It's like the opposite of the Lakers. The Lakers are such a bad offensive team in the half court that they have to fly up and down the floor in transition to try to catch the defense when it's not set. Brooklyn, it's like, feel free to set your defense. You can put Matisse Thybulle on Kyrie Irving. You can put Tobias Harris on Kevin Durant. You can have Joel Embiid waiting under the basket. We don't care, because those guys are incredibly comfortable operating in that environment. Their versatility offensively, if you guys look on my Twitter feed and you scroll down a little bit, you'll see some shot charts. I just tweeted out the shot charts tonight from Kevin Durant, from Kyrie Irving, and from James Harden. As I've said so many times over the last couple of years, James Harden is a remarkably predictable and one-dimensional offensive player. He loves to just attack from a live dribble on the left wing or the right wing, either in isolation or in pick and roll. What he wants to do is get to his step-back jump shot, and if he can't get to his step-back jump shot, he'll go past you, and he doesn't have a mid-range game, so he's going to go all the way to the rim. It makes him remarkably easy to game plan for. And so in settings like this, against a set defense, especially one that knows James Harden really well because they just finished being his teammate and coaching him over the course of the last year, they're going to be really comfortable dealing with James Harden in that half-court environment. Let's go over to the other side now. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, They don't care what defense you're playing. They don't care what guy you put on them. They are tough shot makers. They are comfortable from any spot on the floor. Put them in the corner, they're fine. Put them on the wing, they're fine. Put them at the top of the key, they're fine. Both of those guys can operate out of the post. Yes, even Kyrie Irving is comfortable with his back to the basket in that 10 to 15 foot range. So there's nothing you can do to make them feel uncomfortable or make them do something they don't want to do. They're going to get to their shots, and it's just a question of whether they're going to make them or not. And tonight they made them over great defensive players, and most of the time they will. And chances are 4 times out of 7 they will, which is what makes them so devastating in a playoff series. You could see that in their shot charts. Look at the distribution and the variety of the way that they attack offensively. And juxtapose that with James Harden, who tonight made a handful of step back threes but didn't make enough, and he couldn't get anything going in the mid-range, and he wasn't finishing around the basket around all that size and length that Brooklyn had. That's a real limitation that James Harden has. It's the biggest reason why, even though he's quote unquote the greatest scorer ever by these advanced metrics, it hasn't translated to the postseason. When you get in a 7-game environment, when teams can game plan, when guys can really get used to what James Harden does, it's a relatively easy guy to defend compared to his peers. There's other superstars around the league. It's not a coincidence that he has continued to struggle in those environments. And it's not a coincidence tonight in a huge game in front of a raucous crowd that he struggled to create things offensively. Last thing I wanted to hit on tonight was Joel Embiid. He also shot really poorly tonight. He was 5 for 17. If you look at all the stars, it's kind of funny. Kevin Durant, 17 shots. Kyrie Irving, 17 shots. Joel Embiid, 17 shots. James Harden, 17 shots. So the difference is KD and Kyrie, they went 18 for 34. Joel Embiid and James Harden, they went 8 for 34. That is that lack of offensive versatility on display. What you saw tonight, especially in that first quarter, it's some sort of act from James Harden or from Joel Embiid. It's all fake basketball. There was a play there in the second half where he took a pull-up jump shot on Andre Drummond. He had separation to rise up into a jump shot, a normal basketball jump shot. And instead of doing that, he leaned way forward and jumped forward on his shot and tried to elbow Andre Drummond in the face. He just immediately backed up and didn't get the foul call. But that's the grifting. That's what those guys are trying to do. And as we all know, even though it did work tonight in the first quarter, I think he shot 13 free throws in the first quarter, which is absolutely insane. It doesn't work in the postseason. When you get to the postseason, you have to put the ball in the basket. And I don't care about Joel Embiid having 27 points. He took 17 shots tonight and missed 12 of them. That's what's probably going to happen in the postseason. In the postseason, he's not going to get those calls, and he's going to have to make shots. And that's a whole different ball game at that point. It's like when I was doing those player rankings last night. I am going to factor in regular season success to a certain extent, but we all know there's just a whole other level to the way basketball changes, the way NBA basketball changes when you get into the postseason. Embiid, even in his playoff career, has struggled putting the ball in the basket in terms of his field goal percentage in the postseason. That is a real issue there. He relies too much on the free throw line. So really interesting game. Again, in a 7-game series, there's going to be adjustments. They're going to try to make things more difficult. But what you saw tonight, that's one team in Brooklyn that's going to be comfortable in that 7-game, tons of scouting, tons of game planning. Everyone becomes super familiar with each other. They're going to thrive in that environment. Guys like Embiid and Harden, they're going to tail off over the course of playoff series because of their lack of versatility and because of their inability to thrive in changing circumstances. Thought it was a really interesting game. Again, a blowout, just one game. You got to give Philly a puncher's chance in a series like that. But right now, Brooklyn just looks like the better team for what playoff NBA basketball looks like. And I have to change a lot of my expectations because I said, even in the show last night, I don't know if Brooklyn has enough time to get enough continuity to put something together to make this work. I think I might have been flat out wrong about that. Kyrie and KD have such a natural offensive give and take. Their defensive scheme and system is so modern and so successful in this kind of basketball. And the guys are all bought in and they're competing. And they have a ton of shooting around KD and Kyrie too. This just works. And I think we have to start seriously considering the fact that Brooklyn might be able to pull this off.